My wife and I were married 61 years. In all that time, we never bought a car on credit or a house or a piece of property. We saved the money and paid it out. It took longer to get it, but you know, folks, you get twice as much that way, because in my early years, I found out real quick, the interest is exactly the same as the principal on a house. So you pay double to have it on time. Anyway, we drove up to Brooksville. The guy said he wanted $250,000. And like I say, thank God, because we never realized that just a few miles down the road was this next exit and the turnpike. And at the turnpike, 85% of my customers driving by here turn left to go see the mouse. And they would have never seen that museum at Route 50, but we didn't know that. We didn't even realize it. See, because our little minds wasn't thinking like that, but the big guy was. So we looked all that day, couldn't find nothing from Lake Panisovsky all the way to Brooksville. But you know, we always had a kind of a sour spot in our mouth for this Ocala up here. In the 50s and the 60s, Ocala was just a little podunk town with a bunch of yokels for cops, and the speed limit was 35 miles an hour. And I had to get to the eastern seaboard and the Carolinas. You had to come up 41. My shop was on US 41, Nebraska Avenue, cut over at 200, over to Ocala, pick up 301, and go on north into the eastern seaboard. And you better not be going 35 miles an hour. You better be down around 30, because they're going to get you, and it's going to be $15 right on the spot every time. I think they ran the whole city on those $15 arrests. But anyway, to get back to the story, we was headed home, and I said, honey, let's stop at the Holiday Inn. It was a nice Holiday Inn at Route 50 at the time. And get a room and look in the morning and go further north. So we got down on our knees and we prayed to God. If we were supposed to move this museum, we had to have some help, because everything we looked at was too expensive, too small, or too far away from the interstate. We needed something right on this interstate where people would see it every time they went by. And we asked for help. So the next morning we got it. The first intersection was Wildwood. We stopped for just a minute. There was one piece of property about a half mile from the intersection, $350,000. Got right back on the interstate and further north. We come off this ramp out here. Here's this beautiful piece of property. We needed at least 16 acres. This property is exactly 16 acres, because that's how they cut a section up, 8, 16, 32. But no signs. And my wife just got giddy. She's, oh, honey, look, it's perfect. There's some trees up there. We can put the house. And the museum is set right there. He's pointing right about where we're all sitting. I said, don't see any signs, honey. Don't get too excited. Drove around to where the gate is, and that's why the gate happens to be in that spot. That's where the car parked when I got out of it. And I walked down in the ditch, and it was a tiny little bush. And underneath that bush was a sign about the size of the screen on this tablet. And all it said was for sale, and had a phone number. I said, honey, write down this phone number. She's sitting in the car. Wrote down the number. We didn't have these things. Phones were still attached to the walls. We run over to Stuckey's, which is now the orange shop. I dial the number. Most people don't even know what that dial is anymore. And this lady answers the phone. It's early in the morning, about 8:30, and she says, this is Shirley. What do you want? Well, it wasn't Shirley Muldowney, but the name Shirley just stuck a knife right in me. Because Shirley Muldowney had just kicked my ass in the 1981 AHRA Championship. The first time anybody beat me in the AHRA Championship, it had to be a woman. So anyway, I got my breath.
You signed her driver's license.
I know, I was partially to blame. She's out there. Nobody else would sign it. I forced Ivo to sign it. Yeah. Then, of course, Coletta signed it, because that was his mistress. So anyway, I said, ma'am, there's a piece of property over here on the interstate in 475. It's got your phone number on it. She says, that's my property. What do you want to know about it? I said, I just want to know one thing. How much is it? She said, it's $80,000 cash. No, I just like you to, did you hear that? It's $80,000 cash. That still raises the hair on the back of my neck. Folks, we don't know what we're messing with. This guy's got plenty of power. I said, I'll take it. She says, what are you going to do with it? I said, I'm going to put a museum on it. She said, young man, you can't put a museum on it. It's agriculture. It was a tomato farm. You can run cows on it or something. You can't put a museum on it. I said, I'll just get the zone changed. She says, don't you think it would be prudent to get the zone changed first and then buy the property? I said, no. I've changed zones before. I know how to do it. They're not going to leave that thing agriculture with an intersection right there. She said, okay, young man, meet me at Gus Galloway's and we'll sign the papers. So 30 days later, the title insurance clear, I owned it. Come out here, me and the wife, we walked down the southern fence line, which was a barbed wire fence. There used to be a big, beautiful house next door. And this man come running out of the house. And he says, are you the new owners, Mrs. Garlitz? I said, yes, sir. He says, I'm Robert DuPont of the DuPont family. And we own this horse farm south of you. We always wanted this land. We'll give you $180,000 for it right now, cash. And I said, Mr. DuPont, that's a generous offer. But I will never be able to sell this property in my lifetime. And he said, looked at me kind of funny. He says, why is that? I says, because God himself gave it to me. The county has this property valued at $3 million today. But the funniest story is the encounter with the county commissioners on getting the zone changed. I had this 2-page speech written. Now, mind you, not had a paid visitor in Tampa, right? Just a bunch of freebies. And I'm telling about how I'm going to bring people from all over the world. It's going to be world-class drag racing museum. It's going to increase the visitors in Ocala. And I hadn't had a visit in Tampa. But a few years ago, we had 50 from Russia, from Moscow. So they do come from all over the world. And so I got 2 lines of my speech out. And the county commissioner chairman, Don Green, who I later became good friends with, put up his hand. He says, stop. We don't want to hear it. And folks, I'll tell you, just for a minute, my heart stopped. I thought, my God, what have I done? They don't want to hear it. What do they have in mind for that property? And your mind going a mile a minute, I'm thinking all this stuff, just while he was getting his breath. And he said, we're going to give you the zone. But what we want to know is, why did you land on that intersection? It's never going to be nothing. But that in itself is a double negative. So even, my dad used to tell me, if you said it's never going to be nothing, it's going to be something. And is it something? Have you seen this thing? Oh my gosh. They are changing all this road around to try to accommodate this traffic. It's taken 5 years. By the time they get that finished, it'll be time to do it all over again because it will be too big for what they're doing. They just don't keep up with the times. I don't know why that is. And all that wasted money when they should be half as much to do. Of course, they have to do it with inflated money because the prices go up and up. Anyway, like the Hoover Dam, the visitor center that was built at the Hoover Dam in recent years cost more than to build the whole dam. Did you know that? Yeah, the visitor center cost more to build, like in the 80s, than it cost to build the whole Hoover Dam. Anyway, that's my